always forget. And we are going to be sending a recording of this session around afterwards. So if anyone has to step out or wants to refer to anything, you will be receiving the recording. So I'm Kara. I'm the co-founder of Boston Women's Market. I know a lot of you guys, so it's so great to see you guys here. Every spring, we do a webinar series called the Empower Her Workshops. And we really try to focus on topics that are essential for small business owners in a variety of different stages. So we're super excited to have Bloom Collective back here this year. They did a great workshop series for us last spring, and we're back with another marketing session. There are 3 sessions within this workshop series, and tonight is our launch. So just a reminder that cameras and mics are optional at all times. We do ask that you keep yourself muted if you're not speaking, because I know I have a dog and a baby and kids ringing our doorbell right now. So a lot of background noise happens. Just keep yourself on mute. And yeah, if you have a question and you don't want to use your mic or your camera, you're more than welcome to always put your questions into the chat and we'll get to those throughout. And I know Savannah and Heather have built-in pause moments for questions, so we'll try to get to as many as possible. So just a little bit of background information about Heather and Savannah. So Heather is a co-founder slash crowd motivator for Bloom Collective, and she's a former teacher turned entrepreneur, and she actually owns a shop called Island Vintage on Martha's Vineyard, I think. Is that right, Heather?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, and so she has a lot of experience launching brick and mortar businesses, and she also has a background in education, so she loves blending those 2 hands-on experiences with her passion for small business. And Savannah, you might know Savannah from the market world. She's the owner of Sir Milky Quartz, but then she's also the co-founder of Bloom Collective. So you might see her around. She has a background from RISD, and she's also a Goldman Sachs 10K SB alum along with me, which is super cool. And she loves dedicating her time to helping small businesses build their careers and build their brands through storytelling, photography, and e-com. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to both of you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kara. We're really excited to be back and working with all of you for this workshop series. And as a reminder, as Kara said, this is a 3-part series and there's a lot to get through, a lot to learn. So attending a single workshop is really awesome and we're happy to have you. But essentially the real growth is going to happen when you can attend all 3 sessions and really build upon what you learn. But today we're going to dive into a bit about websites as a whole to ensure that you have a solid foundation before we dive deeper in session 2 and 3.
And just like most of you, I'm sure, Savannah and I both started our other businesses really doing pop-ups. We did big markets, we did weekly markets, we've even done Boston Women's Markets, amongst others. And we know how labor-intensive and time-consuming that markets can be. And eventually we realized that things out of our control, like market traffic and weather and consumer spending habits, they all really impacted our businesses and we couldn't really do too much about it. So we decided it best to scale and diversify our business to avoid solely relying on pop-ups. I have a brick and mortar, like Kara said, and Savannah has a really successful online website, and she's working on even bigger and better one launching next year. We think pop-ups can be empowering and wildly helpful to your business, but in order to grow in a way where you won't have to do all the heavy lifting forever, converting your in-person customers to online is really just going to change the game for you guys, and that's really what we're here for.
I'll do another mini introduction. Since we already have it and you can really get to know us now. But essentially, hello, I'm Savannah, the co-founder of Bloom Collective and founder of Sir Milky Quartz. I'm a New Jersey native, but I've lived in Rhode Island for 10 years now since RISD brought me to the smallest state. I'm an artist, entrepreneur, avid gardener, and bunny mom. If you didn't already know, Sir Milky Quartz is named after my rabbit. I get that question a lot. And more than anything, I'm passionate about helping creative people build fulfilling and sustainable businesses and career. And I bring expertise in branding, visual storytelling, photography, e-commerce, and wholesale strategy to Bloom. And I'm super excited to be here today.
And hi, I'm Heather, the other co-founder of Bloom Collective. I am a Rhode Island native, and I'm now living in Massachusetts on Martha's Vineyard, like Kara said, where my other business, Island Vintage, is located. I do run a brick and mortar vintage and designer clothing store here on Main Street in Vineyard Haven. And with me, I bring a lot of expertise in retail and education as a former teacher, business strategy and web building. And just like Savannah, I'm really excited to start off another great event with Boston Women's Market. We had a really awesome time last year, and we do see some familiar faces that that end up being clients of ours. So it's great to see you guys again. And we're looking forward to it. So unsurprisingly, today we'll be touching base on a lot of website related content, like the differences between various site and hosting platforms, important do's and don'ts for your own website, some navigation musts, call to action buttons, what they are and why you need to have them. And by the end, we'll leave you with a blueprint for a user-friendly website that we can continue to build on in these future workshops. This workshop is not just for folks without a website, though. We want to be really clear about that. I'm sure a lot of you already have a website, but maybe it's not functioning the way that you need it to, like we already heard. So throughout this process, we really want you to think critically about what is and isn't working for you and your business and how you can improve upon what you already have. And as we move throughout the presentation, please let us know in the comments if you guys have any questions along the way. We'll touch base on a little bit of technical information, and then we'll take time to walk you through your worksheets. Then we'll take questions. And finally, we'll finish off with some more important information. We will take questions as we go throughout if we have the opportunity. So feel free to just throw them in the chat. Let's go in.
All right. So why your website matters. So there are so many different ways these days to show up online. But in the end, if you really think about it, it all leads to your website. If you're running an ads campaign, if you're, putting out a post on social media, you hope that they go to your website to do something. So it's your storefront of the internet, the place where you can showcase your brand, product, and story in the most personable way possible. It's really customizable. It's entirely yours. And it doesn't have the structure and formatting of a corporation telling you the parameters of how to best showcase what you do, like on Faire and Etsy and Amazon. So you can really, play, get creative, but do so in a way that's strategic. And with a little bit of know-how, it is amazing how creative your website can be, essentially as creative and engaging as your pop-up booth setup, and you want those to mirror one another.
So we like to think of it as imagining if you had a really beautiful retail storefront with really awesome window displays and products that people are just dying to buy, but there's a sign in the window that says you can't come in. It might seem a little odd to think about, but honestly, that's essentially what it's like having a social media presence or an in-person presence without a website. Your socials can be doing amazing things for your business. Pop-ups can be doing amazing things for your business. But if the people that follow you can't actually purchase anything online, you're really unable to convert that buzz into a conversion, and it leads to long-term sustainability issues for your business. All roads should lead back to your website to allow you to focus on growth and scalability. All right, so we're going to get a little bit technical now. We're looking at visual merchandising online. In person, you're able to observe how your customers interact with your product in real time, one-on-one. You know when your item's going to be a hit. You know when your item's not going to be a hit based on the reactions that you receive either in person or at markets. So online, it may be a little bit different, but we're still able to monitor that interaction with your customer and even design for an optimized experience. So consider your ability to monitor your customers online, as everything can really be measured in clicks, in time on the page, and in engagement. So just like at markets, instead of asking somebody in person to join your mailing list, all you really need is a well-timed pop-up before they leave your webpage to get that same information. Instead of really cute displays with varying heights and an open layout guiding their eye in person, online you can rely on great photography, clear categories, and search relevance. So that's where these technical terms UI and UX come in, which are essentially, we like to consider your online visual merchandising opportunities. When you look at UI or user interface, it's basically a fancy way of saying this is how your website looks. UI is your visual appeal. Just like a well-designed storefront, a polished UI draws people in and it keeps them engaged. It may seem a little bit like a different language right now, but it's one that you're really going to easily learn. The same principles of great merchandising still apply, just essentially online instead of in person. When we look at UX or user experience, consider this to be how your website works. UX is like your store layout. If the navigation is smooth, your customers will stay. If they're frustrated, they are going to leave. So you don't want that to happen. You want a quick, easy, and bug-free experience for anybody who visits your store online. Keep your desired interface and user experience in mind when we review site platforms to see if one stands out to you. So take a second to think, how do I want my user to see my website? How do I want them to experience it and dive in? And then keep that in mind as we review the platforms and go, okay, ooh, that one might really work for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And not all websites are the same, and neither are the platforms that they're built on. They all kind of have a different, functionality, visual pizzazz, and think about how unique like each business is, which pops up at Boston Women's Market, and how everyone takes time to consider what goes here and there, and how the customer interacts with their product and the shopkeeper in real time. Essentially, all of that information and data can be captured, and translated to a web version of, your business experience. Because everything has an essence and flair. And if not consciously, subconsciously, there is a strategy behind it. And we, kind of figuring out how to translate it between that like subconscious to conscious strategic move is kind of what we want to do here. And the difference here is online, the information just can be a little harder to understand, and the strategy is often not exactly the same. So we're going to kind of walk you through how to make that translation happen. So the first thing, when you kind of approach this, you have a lot of different types of websites. So you're going to want to think about your intention as a business and what you want your customer to do when they arrive. So like upon arrival, what's the first thing you want them to do? Are you a service business, a single product shop, a restaurant, a nonprofit? So identifying what's the number one thing you want your customer to do when they arrive will help you decide how to plan the layout and the overall user experience, or UX that Heather was talking about.
And websites can be multifaceted. They can serve a purpose, a variety of purposes, but you really want to think about what's the most important thing you want your customers to do. And that's really what you're going to base your website build on, and what you're going to prioritize. So you want your website to portray the essence of you and your business in just a few seconds when they get on. Markets are going to provide you the opportunity to meet your customer face to face and talk to them and really work through things. But online, they're much harsher critics. So if we can figure out how to tell your story and promote your products just right, that's where the real magic starts happening. Alrighty, so first we're going to take a look at where you can build and host your website. Again, if you already have a functioning website, take this time to really think about whether or not your current platform is fully servicing all of your needs, because it might be time to try something new. It's also important to keep in mind that most of these platforms allow a free trial, so creating an account for any or all of them just to explore your options is a really nice way to dive in.
All right. Okay. I missed a slide. So like all technology, the options out there for building websites continue to change and improve every single day. And just like marketing, if you took our last workshop, running a website is a very active process, especially if you're looking for high yield results. So, big businesses have huge teams working on their websites all the time, all the bells and whistles, making sure that everything is functioning, that it's converting properly. I understand that you don't have that kind of team necessarily, but there's a lot of things that we can do to automate those processes. Or you can also hire a great team to get on top of those details, either before your website's built or after it's built if you need a little bit of extra help. Nonetheless, we really feel like it's always worth investing in one, and we often find that businesses are taken less seriously without a section of the internet to call home. Your website presence or lack thereof can pull a lot of weight on event applications, grant applications, and more. Essentially, it just helps you stand outside of the crowd. It is the place where you can kind of say, hey, look, this is me and this is everything I do. And this is the way I want you to experience my brand.
Yeah, and it seems like looking at the chats that you guys sent in, a lot of you have a product-based business, which is very good. We've built a lot of websites for product-based business owners, and we find that the most tried and true platforms tend to really be Squarespace and Shopify. So a big part of their appeal across the board is the ability to easily make updates to your website with just like a little bit of know-how. With other platforms, you might find yourself having to like literally call up a developer just to make a tiny little change, because everything editable is going to be inside a wall of code. If you're not somebody that cares to get into code, then I would recommend staying away from a website like WordPress, and we'll look at some other options like Figma and things like that. But nonetheless, Squarespace and Shopify are not the only options on the market, though they are our favorite. You might find another option that works better for you. So that's what we're here for, to help you kind of explore them.
All right. So first up is Shopify. Most of you, if you're in the product world, you probably have heard of Shopify. Maybe you already use it. It's my absolute go-to for a power-packed e-commerce builder, which isn't necessarily meant for an enterprise level company. So i.e. small, perfect for small business, but you can really do a lot of power pack stuff with, Shopify. Its robustness lies in its inventory management system, which can be plugged into multiple platforms. For many businesses, it's a great way to solve organizational issues, and it really lays a foundation for scaling, in my opinion. It will force you to really get organized and essentially build your online warehouse, so to say. I really love Shopify for its ability to sync product across multiple sales channels, such as Etsy, Faire, eBay. This is something I think is really valuable to most product-based businesses, especially if they're selling on all these channels, but they kind of have inventories that are entirely disconnected. Shopify also even allows you to potentially sync your in-person inventory too, which I think is really great. And I feel like that's one of the quickest, the easiest stumbles to have happen early on in the game, where, it's like, oh, I just sell something online, but I also sold that on a market. So this kind of helps fix that issue. And it can act as a hub, so your inventory wires don't get crossed, like I mentioned. It does have a huge third-party plugin library, which can help you do almost anything you desire without coding know-how. And I find that Shopify is best suited for those with larger inventories and lots of SKUs, or relatively, robustly sized inventories, or for those who are looking to engage in a drop shipping model. And if that's something you've never heard of before, I'm happy to answer some questions on that later. But essentially, Shopify, if you're in the world of product and logistics and shipping and getting things places, it really does a really great job of that.
I consider Squarespace to basically be the king of small business platforms. If you have a small product line, a service-based business, or a brick and mortar, this can be really like the best choice for you. Like Savannah was saying about Shopify, that's a really amazing platform for somebody with a lot of SKUs. Squarespace gets a little bit clunky, I'd say, when you're selling hundreds of different products. If you're selling a couple dozen different products, Squarespace is a really great website to at least start on and then potentially grow into Shopify. Shopify is definitely a little bit more difficult to learn. Squarespace is very intuitive. You can work among collaborators. So like Savannah and I have a creator account. When we're working with small businesses, we can tie them into the website that we're building as a collaborator, and we can really dive into it together and team up with other people, which is really nice. It does allow for like super quick changes. Very seldom will you need code on Squarespace unless you want to do something kind of outside of the scope of the theme that you choose. And I use Squarespace for my own business, and I really recommend anybody to use it who wants to build their own website with a small product line. Bloom initially did start on Squarespace, and we moved over to Shopify this past year, and that's okay too. You can grow into a platform and try something out, and it can work for you perfectly.
All right. So if anyone has heard of Wix, it is very similar to Squarespace in a lot of ways. It is a drag and drop editor, very code light, which can be used as a good foundation for service-based sites and selling digital and physical products. I would say it generally isn't the first to pop in my mind when I think of e-commerce, but it does have those capabilities. I do find the main difference between Squarespace and Wix is kind of the end result in terms of look and feel of the site and the back-end user experience. I kind of feel like Squarespace sites tend to have the design feel of like a hipster coffee shop, and Wix more of a professional like accounting firm. Not saying those things aren't interchangeable. It's just kind of how the platform itself has designed their templates to appeal to the target demo using their platform. So you can design a Wix site that looks like a hipster coffee shop. It's not that that's not the case, but it's just, I kind of think kind of like who they're trying to capture and the types of websites that I see that are kind of built on these individual platforms, but they both are really great. I feel like it really just depends on what backend platform you like better, and using them is a very different experience. So that's kind of going back to what Heather said about making free trials, trying things out, making sure you even like using the platform before you go, whole ham and committing to it is definitely a smart move.
WordPress. WordPress is a tough one for me to comment on. I do not like it, if that's a little taboo to say, but it is the host of over 30% of websites globally for a reason. It is a bit difficult to learn for beginners, which is why I don't like using it for small businesses, because I think it's important to set small businesses up with the ability to edit your site themselves. But nonetheless, it is a really great platform for large scale and complex sites, as it allows for a lot of customization via code and plugins. But just keep in mind that you're probably going to need to hire a professional or become one if you'd like a WordPress site. And just note, you'll have to host the site yourself. You also have to add payment gateways, as they're not native to WordPress. So WordPress is definitely not a website platform for beginners, but it is definitely something that you can get into or grow into as your business progresses.
And I definitely think that's a good recommendation. Choose the platform for where you're at, and when you're kind of graduating, you can take that next step, and and then hiring a professional is definitely, the right choice, I think, in that moment.
And I do see some comments about Big Cartel. We are not,
Big cartel.
yeah, particularly knowledgeable about Big Cartel. We haven't dived into it. Would be very interested to hear later on today, like how people feel about that, if that's a platform that we should explore
Sure.
as designers and small businesses. So I will ask you guys a little bit about that later on if you don't mind sharing. So we did just throw a lot of information at you though. So let's take a look at our comparison chart. We do have Figma on there. Figma is not a website hosting platform, but it is a website designing platform that is relatively, I guess, again, like WordPress, it's a little bit more difficult to learn, and it's not as intuitive, but it's highly customizable. It's really great for design. If you guys are really into that, something to check out. So the issue too that we've mentioned previously is that it's not black and white in deciding which platform you should choose for your website build. So remember that you can outgrow your platform just like we did, and that's totally fine. Again, you have the opportunity to get a free subscription with almost any one of these. So feel free to create accounts with all of them and just click around on the back end. If you resonate with one more than another, maybe that's the platform that is easiest for you to kind of move forward with and start building on. There's a lot of really nice, easy templates on Squarespace and on Wix where you can kind of just plug in some photos, plug in some text. You can brand it with your colors, and it will produce a relatively decent website for you to build on. If you want something a little bit more customizable, it's going to have to be a little bit more thought out. It is going to take a little bit of time, but I think it's well worth it if you invest the time and energy in it.
Yeah. And like, mentioning Big Cartel too brings up the fact that this is obviously a short list of website platforms that exist out there. I will just say these are kind of the hot ones in the industry, the ones that we find clients coming to us and be like, can you build a website on X? The most commonly, but I hear about all sorts of weird platforms that are just kind of floating out there in the ether. I generally, when I go to choose something like this, I say, how many different things are well equipped to plug into my website that I already use? And generally that's like the winner. It's like, who is kind of has the space in the market that they are really, thinking about third-party integration and whatnot, and which is why Shopify usually kind of wins out in that scenario, because they just have made so many things kind of easy. So if you already are very reliant on something in your business, I would think about, okay, who has the technology to make that thing plug into my website super easy? And that's really a great place to start. So go ahead, Heather.
Well, I was just going to say, we did get a good question about how do you change platforms if you have a domain already? Is it really difficult? And that is totally, I don't want to say totally easy to do, because depending on the platform you choose, we were just working with a client earlier today who was working with a third-party domain purchaser, and it's just a little bit complicated to move her domain. But if you're buying your domain on Squarespace and you eventually want to transfer it to Shopify, it's a relatively easy process. It might just take a couple days. You have your email down for a moment as the internet kind of understands what's happening with your website, but it's very easy. Usually on the back end of all of these sites, you can go in and you can literally click like send my domain over this way or grab my domain from here. So that's something too, that if you guys ever needed like a quick 30-minute phone call, just let us know. We can help you out kind of getting through that process too. Or you can just kind of Google, hey, what's the best way to transfer domain from Squarespace to Shopify, or from Wix to Squarespace or whatever. And there's a lot of info out there, but it's relatively easy.
They have made it a lot easier over the years. It used to not be nearly as easy. You had to have a lot of technical know-how. That is not necessarily the case anymore. Especially like, I don't know if all of you know, but Squarespace now owns like all of Google domains and have for a while. So, you know, they're kind of hosting most of that. So like the amount of people in the domain game has kind of gone down. And so there's not as many places to be transferring things everywhere, but Squarespace is a really organized platform. And if you need to buy a domain, you can definitely buy one through Squarespace, even if you aren't hosting your website there. So that's also something to keep in mind too, is that your platform that you're hosting your actual website on, like where the code is located and where your payment gateways are and everything, does not need to be the same platform that your domain is purchased through. But we'll kind of chat about a little bit more of this as we kind of go along. But I'm going to hop on to our next slide, which before we start getting into our worksheets, we are going to go through some website do's and don'ts, just so you can kind of keep these in mind as you think of, you know, the way to either grow your current site or build a brand new one.
So we've got a good example here on the right of a website we recently did for Kristen Runvik. So what we try to use this as an example for is that Kristen's site is really colorful. She's got great branding, but it's not overwhelming, and it feels really authentic to her. And you can relatively easily navigate the website itself. So essentially the goal is to create a website that's branded with clear messaging, and you get the impression that she's a really lovely person that you'd like to work with right away, because her photos are really clean. The photos are also branded with her floral inspiration and her beautiful color choices. And it just all creates kind of a seamless user experience. We made sure that her navigation was really clean with minimal choices as well, and that the layout is really simple and easy to understand. It's a little silly to say, but I like to use the KISS model, which is an acronym for Keep It Simple Stupid. So put yourself in your customer's shoes or your consumer's shoes. Can they go on your website and do they understand what's happening instantaneously? Like if you think, you know, oh man, are they going to understand this? They probably won't. So scale it back, use simple words, really just try to lay it out as simply as you can. You can still be branded. You can still use some fun words and some punchy text, but you do have to keep it as simple as possible. So when we look at do's, that's kind of the commonality theme, right? With your layout, you're keeping it simple with clear hierarchies. With your design, you're sticking to a cohesive color scheme and fonts. Your photos are high quality and curated, but the photos are also not overwhelming. They showcase your product or your feature very simply. A clean white background for product photography is always going to be a win. And with those photos, you want to make sure that your load times are optimized. So sometimes you have really beautiful photos, but the file size is super large and it takes too long to load on somebody's phone. And then they click your website and they scooch out of there right away. So make sure your file sizes are as compact as possible while retaining that design and keeping everything looking relatively seamless. So sorry, I'm just looking at a question.
Yeah, you're good.
What photo size is optimal for photos so that it doesn't take too long to load?
Every website platform has its own parameters, but I would say smaller the better, as small as possible, but it still looks high resolution. That's my answer. It's like it just needs to be you know, I mean, usually it's like below like 1,000, you know, pixels. It's definitely something that is very well laid out for you, depending on which platform you are using and what type of, like on Shopify, when you go to build, every different section, depending on what type of photo you're trying to, it's like a banner photo, cover photo, product photo, it'll kind of give you parameters for that. So if you use Photoshop or any kind of web, you know, design platform, you can just pop it in there and resize, you know, to the optimal size. Saw a raised hand. Was that somebody? Kara, are you, I don't know.
Yeah, let me see. Fire, did you want to ask a question? If so, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
And if that was an accident, absolutely no
That's
worries.
okay too.
Yeah, that's fine
Keep
too.
going.
No worries.
No, I actually did want to ask a question. Sorry, I couldn't
Great.
unmute myself in time. Um, so I have a few names that I have registered under GoDaddy. Is that like an example of third-party domain? I'm a little confused between all the words like domain and then the website is different and the host is different. Can
Absolutely.
you just explain that a bit? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I-
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
for example, so GoDaddy is a domain host. So they essentially own and manage your domain. Squarespace, in this scenario, which is going to make it a little tricky, is also a domain host, but you can build your website on Squarespace as well. So it's kind of doing a little bit of both. So your domain host is where your domain lives on the internet, where you pay for your domain. And then your website host is where your website lives on the internet, where you're building your website and where you're actually paying for that website online. So those two things can be the same platform if they have that capability. And a lot of people use GoDaddy. And if you own multiple domains on GoDaddy, but you want to build your website, like what's front facing on the internet on Squarespace or on Shopify, essentially what you're going to do is just connect your GoDaddy domain to your new website that you're building on whatever platform. So you're just going to want to make a domain connection. And usually when you go into the domain settings on whatever platform you're using, you should be able to do that relatively easily with a little bit of technical knowledge. But does that answer your question for the most part?
Yes, because I was getting confused between
That's okay.
what is the website and what's the domain. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And just to clarify, I do think that nowadays you can actually build on GoDaddy. It is just not
Oh,
a
you
very,
can. Yes, that is
yes,
true.
yes, it's just not a common factor, I think, or a common platform that people do build on. It's almost more of like a domain, but it's almost like they saw in the market. They were like, hey, wait a minute, I can make some more money doing this. So they definitely do have that option. Just like Squarespace, you can do it on either end. But we definitely recommend Squarespace or Shopify if you're a product-based business, at least starting out with. GoDaddy's almost like a little bit like WordPress, Wix blend, like, the back end can be a little bit funny sometimes.
Good to know. Thank you.
Of course.
All right. We're going to move on to some more do's and don'ts. So essentially, something you want to keep in mind when you arrive to a site, you want the visuals to be really easy to understand and not intrusive. So the design should be hierarchical and visually pleasant. And we're going to get more into that into session 2. And we'll really talk about how to build the foundation and then make it look like you. And so for Melissa's e-commerce site that we have on this page, she really wanted her jewelry to be the star of the show. So essentially, right on the homepage, you go right into shopping, focus on the photography and to lead the customer's decision and to be a really clear call to action. Like, this is my this is what I want to lead with in terms of, come to my site and buy something. And I always think that in a good design, generally less is more, and your customer should be laser focused on exactly what you want them to do as soon as they arrive. So that means not arriving on a site and having like music playing at you and this and that, it's like, you don't want it to really like feel like MySpace necessarily. I mean, that can be fun in some scenarios, but I think the main thing to take away is that everything you do should be very intentional. And you should focus on, the less is more. You don't want pop-ups flying at your customers as soon as they arrive, unless you want to make them feel overwhelmed and that they want to leave. And just keep in mind when you explore other people's sites, how certain things make you feel, why you're making certain decisions, why you're clicking on a button. Those things are, they might help inform the way that you actually put your own website together.
All right. And we do know the importance, of course, of good design, but there is a lot more that goes into a site, kind of like the back end stuff. For example, one thing that people have a tendency to almost like forget or put on the back burner is accessibility. Not only is accessibility a good thing to have in general, but Google cares about your accessibility too. So if you're not aware of kind of how Google ranks your website, it will essentially be reading your website. And if it has any difficulty understanding it or reading it, it will not give you as good of a grade, essentially, as somebody else who has really high contrast text and, backgrounds. And essentially, it's just like Google knows, is this an easy website to look at? Is this a user-friendly website? And it kind of gives you boosted points if your website does have all the right things. We're not going to get too technical on that kind of stuff, but just something to keep in mind. And you'll see some of that show up in the platforms that you guys end up working with as well. Some do's that we definitely want to talk about, hierarchy. So, font size, color, and spacing to guide your users. When you look over on the right here, we have a meet the team in our services. If you're just scrolling through a website and all of the text is the same size, you are going to have no idea where you want to click on. So you want to click on, or you want to kind of set up your website to have bigger headings, bolded points, and just some sort of hierarchy where people kind of understand the layout intuitively right away without having to read everything. Make sure that you regularly check and fix your links too. Sometimes links get broken, either from like a press clipping or a page on your website, a page on somebody else's. Take the practice of once a month, once a week, whatever you have the time for, to go through your website, click all the links, make sure everything is working the right way, because it can be very embarrassing if a customer clicks on something and it doesn't work, and then you're just kind of potentially losing some money on a very simple mistake. So, and also pay attention to user feedback. Review feedback, make improvements. If somebody tells you something's not working, listen to them and fix it. Don't ignore the user input, because it's really important. And I like to kind of reel in my family to do some user feedback for me. So when you're launching your website, ask your friends, ask your family. Go on my website, click everything, read everything. Do I have any typos? And then take all of their advice to heart and try to fix as much as you can before you're publicly launching. So feel free to do a beta testing.
Absolutely. All right. So, next step, we're going to pop into the worksheet portion of the class and answer a whole bunch of questions for you all. But if you wouldn't mind grabbing your printed version or digital version of your worksheet, we're going to start kind of working through that now. This is not something we expect you to do within, the next 15 minutes, half hour. So definitely just kind of familiarize yourself with it, ask us questions. This is why we're here. So essentially, if you have that open in front of you, it's a guide to opening your virtual shop. And step one is really about laying the foundation of your site. So we're thinking about navigation, layout, main goals, target audience. We have pro tips in a couple of spots. Like, for example, this one is buying related domain names to yours for extra security. And you can take all those domain names and point them to one website, which is super cool. So if someone mistypes your URL, they're still going to end up on your site. This is something that generally larger businesses do. Heather, do you have a
Yes, I just wanted to note too that my business used to be called Fresh and Fossil. That's how people knew me in Providence. I kept that domain, and when I changed my name to Island Vintage and opened a new website, I just made it so that my Fresh and Fossil website directs you right to this website, so there's no confusion. And anybody that still follows me on my old social media channels, if they want to check in with me, they're not lost forever. So if you change your business name or something like that, it's really important to keep those, at least for a little while, directing towards your new website.
Absolutely. That's a good point. So on the worksheet, step 2 dives into user experience, like identifying how users interact with your site and the key actions. I'm just going to kind of breeze through this because I know we don't have too much time. And then on step 3, we're going to think about layout and design and how you can make your site feel uniquely yours. So we suggest coming up or doing some market research and coming up with examples of websites that you love the design of that are a good jumping off point. This is really useful, especially if they're in the same industry as you and are a competitor, because we want to understand, kind of what is working for them and how we can make something work for you. And lastly, we want to focus on mobile for a moment. It's important to make your website really, really mobile friendly. Most websites are viewed on phones nowadays. So if you have a website that all of a sudden breaks on your phone and just looks like a bunch of piled buttons, nobody is going to be able to use it, unfortunately. So definitely always test that. Squarespace has a really great feature where you essentially can design mobile view almost separately from the desktop view. It just know when you're making web updates, it doesn't update the mobile. So you might launch and be like, oh no, why does mobile not just look like a rearranged version of my web site? or my desktop site. So you will need to go in there and kind of replicate or change the design in the mobile version, but that's a really great add-on that they put in there. And then on the last page of the worksheet, we're going to dive into product, laying out the various elements of your product page if you do have them, with some key suggestions for building a listing with all the right parts. And some things you should even keep in mind in terms of, you know, like variants and like features and, you know, all of the additional information that your customer might want to know in order to be convinced that they should buy what you're, you know, you make handmade garments, washing instructions, like things like that, that are all sizing, things that are really good to know. And the last thing is just some must-dos before launching. And the goal, like Heather said, is test, like make sure your website actually works, have people try it out, you know, and then kind of just going through that checklist is a really helpful last step. And our last workshop really deals a lot with that launch phase. So I know we're breezing through things now, but this workshop is really just meant to kind of think about that foundation.
Yes, and this worksheet is really meant to be a blueprint for you, and it's going to be useful whether or not you ultimately decide to build or edit your website on your own, or if you pass it off to a professional or an employee later on down the line. We feel like half the line or half the battle is knowing what's possible and how to talk about your needs and wants to a designer or somebody that you're going to be working with. So if you can just like jot some notes down and get an idea for really what you want your user to experience, you're going to be able to translate that a lot easier to somebody else if you kind of have it in writing first. All right, I think we're going to look at some questions now, either about the worksheets, thing you guys put in the chat. I'm going to look through some of these.
Yep, please feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question in person. You can also turn on your camera if you're comfortable with that, or totally put your questions into the chat.
It does look like, yeah, the other question that I looked at briefly was, I use Shopify, but nobody buys, only people look at it. One of the craziest facts that I like to relay is that 250,000 websites are made a day. So there are a lot of websites out there. There's a lot of competition. So just creating a site is not necessarily going to bring your customers in, which is why we really wanted to talk to you guys at Boston Women's Market as people that do a lot of pop-ups, because you have already a competitive advantage over other people, is that you have customers that are coming to you, purchasing your product in person. So it's going to be a lot easier to get those people to convert and then buy from you online as it is to just send it out into the ether without any sort of customer connection from the get-go. So leverage your pop-up markets, because you are definitely going to be able to make a lot easier connections with people and try to get those people to follow you online, to you know, look at your products on your website. You can say, hey, I've got this special deal for people that are only here at Boston Women's Market. If you take this coupon code, you can get a free X, Y, and Z on my website, or you can get a free percentage off on my website. You know, so really just kind of think creatively. There is a lot that goes into building websites. There's SEO, there's imaging, there's accessibility. I mean, there's mapping, there's a lot of technical stuff that I don't want to get into too much. But it's always okay to ask some questions, ask a professional, get some consulting if you feel like you're a little bit in over your head or just generally having a difficult time of getting your customers in the door. And some of that isn't necessarily your website, it's just marketing. So, you know, there's a lot to think about on that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It might just mean that people aren't seeing you. So how can we get them to see you and interact with you?
Yeah, and it's, as Heather said, an extremely competitive space, and there are generally, you know, most moments people with a lot more you know, ability to like spend on ads and whatnot to kind of drown you out. So it's kind of figuring out like, what is your you know, how are you going to be seen online? What is your competitive advantage there? And like Heather said, just being connected to all these in-person markets, having a customer base, really leveraging things like email marketing, like do what you actually can. You don't need to break the bank. You know, if the thing about a website is like, if you were able to get all the business in the world, you know, everyone would be a millionaire and just, you know, like it would be amazing. But at the end of the day, like it is a really competitive space. And if people aren't buying on your site, but there is traffic coming on your site, maybe the other thing is the traffic is just not your actual customer. So you can kind of dive into that a little bit more. And that's kind of where that Google Analytics piece comes in. Also looking at all of the reports that Shopify runs, you know, if they're making it to the cart, but they're not actually purchasing, maybe the customer is like shocked by shipping prices. You know, there's a lot of things that kind of go into that, you know, where if someone was buying something in person, they might be like, oh, this is too expensive, but you're going to never know unless you kind of dive into the analytics and all of the data that's on your website, which is one of the really great things about it. But it is a different beast.
Yeah, and look through that must do before launch list. And like, you know, it's easy sometimes to throw out a website and think that everything's going okay. Actually purchase something on your website. Like pay a few dollars to get into it. Make sure that the process is seamless. Pricing isn't weird on shipping. Sometimes that happens automatically and people don't even realize that that's something that's happening on the back end. So play around with your website. Look at your analytics. If people are, you know, clicking a bunch of very specific products and then adding to cart and then not actually finishing off with it, like where is that drop off? Like how can you find that? You got to dive into the data a little bit.
I had a question.
Yes.
And maybe we'll get into this later, but a lot of times when I talk to the small businesses at Boston Women's Market, they talk about the fact that they have an Etsy shop already and they're considering then having their own website where you obviously have more control of things like advertising and shipping and fees and things like that. But then they struggle with the concept of managing two platforms. Is it going to be worth the money, investment in time and money, and labor to build and manage this new website? Will it actually pay off? Do you guys have any words of wisdom revolving around that kind of concept?
So for me, I feel like Etsy is I think it's all about your end goal. I think that's kind of a good place to start. And like where you actually see your business growth heading. And if you want to keep it as like something that feels very much like a side hustle, and like maybe you don't ever want to get into that moment where you're going to be, you know, hiring a bunch of people, working with a manufacturer, kind of scaling things up. I could say that, you know, you could stay on Etsy forever, but as soon as you start kind of wanting to scale or wanting to really take up space and grow your business, that having your own website really is that differentiator. The cool thing about Shopify, like I said, that you can connect your inventory. So really you're only managing one inventory. And you can even try to convert those Etsy customers into your customers. That's the thing. Etsy's customers are their customers. They're not your customers. So you need to make them your customers. And that is really the way that you will grow your brands. Because otherwise, you know, they're Etsy's customers. You don't get all of the data that you're going to get when they're visiting your website. You know, so that's a real benefit to you. You know, I don't know if there's anything else you have in mind, Heather, but I feel like I could talk about this all day.
No, I mean, I think that's a really great way to look at it. If you're looking to scale your business, growing your website is almost a must do. And again, you can connect your Etsy with your Shopify, or there's even third-party plugins for Squarespace and things like that. So you can make it a lot more seamless than having to manage two different websites. And just create a very base level website. It doesn't have to be this crazy WordPress thing with all this coding and whatever. If you can pick a really simple platform to let your website live on, then you won't have to deal with as much general maintenance and code changing and things like that too.
Yeah.
It looks like sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I think Etsy is a great traffic driver. I mean, they do that naturally. And they're obviously spending a lot of money, more money than any one person could ever spend on getting traffic. I think the key is really when you can start to like figure out a way to capture that customer and then potentially have them follow you on social media. Like even the thing that you send in your package to your customer has your website, your social media, get them on your mailing list, like, you know, get them hooked and interested in what you're doing. And it's great they found you on Etsy, but then Etsy just essentially, you know, you paid Etsy extra money to get a customer that's now yours. You can think about it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a question, but first I just want to mention what Erica said about setting up an abandoned cart email to try to get the conversion on Shopify. Again, Shopify is really amazing. It has a really great amount of like plugins and third-party apps, and even just some built-in features on the website itself. That's one that you guys should really try to take advantage of. So essentially, if you're not familiar with it, all that is that if somebody puts your thing in the cart, in their cart, and then they leave your website, they get an email later on that's like, hey, you forgot something. I'm sure you guys have seen this with plenty of online shopping. If you're, like window shopping online at I was going to say JCPenney. I don't think many people do that, but like J. Crew or something like that. And you're putting all this stuff in your cart and then you leave and later on J. Crew's like, hey, do you want 20% off? And you're like, oh, geez, 20% off. That sounds pretty good. So think about how you want to reach your customer, because it's not just J. Crew that has the ability to do that. You do too. You can give them discounts. You can give them reminders. There's a lot of different features you can play with on the website. Yeah. And Shopify can take care of shipping and taxes too. Sophia said, can you get your Shopify customer list to integrate to an email list provider?
Oh, yes. No, go ahead, Heather.
You definitely can. And that's across pretty much all of the platforms we spoke on. There's so many third-party integrations that it's almost like anything that you want to do on your website, with Shopify and Squarespace, and maybe not as much with Wix and WordPress, but like with Shopify and Squarespace, there's so many different things that you can plug in for people creating third-party apps, that even if it's not a feature that's inherently offered on the platform itself, you can get a plugin that's either free or like a paid monthly subscription. And sometimes it's only $3 a month to do something that, is going to be really imperative to your business. And it's worth kind of checking out on there too. Okay.
And we do have one hand raised if you guys don't mind taking one more question.
Oh my
from
gosh, yeah.
Sarah.
Yes.
Hey guys, I'm Sarah.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. So my question is maybe a bit bigger for here, but I'm just thinking about it like for someone who has a lot of. So I have right now, my only website is an art business, like painting, prints, cards, stuff like that, and that's mostly my life in connection to Boston Women's Market. But I have lots of other parts of life that I do, like I'm a singer and a professor, and like I do other things that are going to require websites. I'm just wondering about what your philosophy is, and like if someone has like a multi-pronged creative life, like do you have multiple websites? Do you have one that just goes to like I feel like I don't know. It's been weird. Like, what do you attach to your name?
Yeah.
And what is its own business? And I don't want to look like a dilettante, but like that's my life.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important question. I mean, I think I have 5 websites just my own personal websites, that do various things. Some of them were at one point connected. In general, I found moments in life where, I felt like I needed to disconnect them in order to be successful professionally in that space. I would say that if you are presenting yourself as an artist who does X, Y, and Z, that is totally fine. But then when you're dealing with that consumer, that's like maybe finding you through Boston Women's Market and they're coming to your website and they're looking to like buy your product, they might be a little confused by that journey, of being like, oh, like I expected one thing and now I'm sort of presented with all these other things. So it's all about context, I think is the biggest thing that always comes to mind. And I like to put myself in the shoes of the person who's kind of approaching me. And I've even broken websites down to like, I sold multiple products and maybe half those products don't really make sense for that brand anymore because they've just kind of become in a way irrelevant or were hindering growth. So I definitely think that's a really important question to ask. I would say that if, not saying go make 5 websites, but I do think if you can find some place to kind of separate like your brand, like who you are as an artist, and then, maybe the more e-commerce product aspect of it, that might be a good split point, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. I know we're just about at time. If you give us like a couple more minutes, we're just going to breeze through the last bit of slides. And then, if anybody has to go, we totally understand. But if you want to pop through those, Savannah, we can kind of finish up very quickly. Okay, so yep, I know I touched on this briefly already, but just to bring it back up, we're looking at using your pop-up markets at Boston Women's Market and elsewhere to drive traffic to your digital platform, which is essentially connecting virtual to in-person and in-person to virtual. So here's a few different ways that you can kind of go about doing that. A really tried and true one is using QR codes at any in-person event or any sort of like retail offering that you may have. Having a QR code next to your product or at your booth is a really nice way to get those people to follow you online. You can incentivize them with like a discount or just a smile, whatever you can do to get them to follow you online. It's also okay to be super transparent and say, hey, I'm trying to grow my online platform. If you want to follow me on Instagram, use this QR code, or if you want to check out my website, I just redid it, please scan me and check this out. There's a few other really good things here, like collaborating with other vendors. Sometimes you can do giveaways on Instagram with other people that can kind of lead folks just to your general online presence. And just, be sure to try to create some urgency, some exclusive offers, and have fun when you're at these pop-ups. Try to get people to interact with you online. Again, these slides will be available online, so feel free to check them out afterwards to read through the whole nitty-gritty.
Absolutely. All right, so we get to the age-old question. Now you're like, oh my gosh, all these things, can I actually do this myself? So the answer is, well, maybe in a lot of cases, yes. Like anything, web design, layout, coding, copywriting, photography, Google Analytics are all skill sets. So if you possess them or if you have time to learn, then great. But always keep in mind that if you want expert results like right out the gate, it does, often make sense to hire an expert for at least like some part of the puzzle. A lot of times people take on a website and they're just like, I'm going to do every single piece all by myself. And then they are like, why am I struggling to kind of get it up and running? Just so you know, it's not easy. There's a lot of competition in the space too. So if you're doing anything a little off, generally, it's not going to work for you as well as you might want it to right off the bat, but it is something that, it's a puzzle that's worth solving. It's something that does take time, but if you really want to grow your business, it's a really, really key tool. And there's a really wide range of approach to site building. And we do love these workshops as an opportunity to be transparent and give a sneak peek behind like the veil of actually hiring for your business, which any business owner knows is something that is sometimes the only way to move forward. Because time is your greatest resource, and it's often better spent doing what you're already like kick-ass at and getting help for the rest. If that's something you need, you should really follow your instincts. And you might find that passing off a few tasks is what propels you forward like never before. And if you're going to look into hiring a professional, we just wanted to put down some numbers on paper that are average ranges of what you might expect to receive as a quote. This isn't necessarily like textbook, but it is at least hopefully a little bit helpful.
And I know some of these numbers can get to be like a little bit scary when you look at them, but understand that pricing varies really substantially on what you need. You could get some consulting for somebody to kind of help you through a little bit of a website, or you might have this like giant e-commerce site with thousands of products, and obviously that's going to be exponentially more expensive than if you have a dozen things that you want to sell on Squarespace. So Shopify, people with very large brands. I should have had some examples at the ready, but there's some really substantial businesses that use Shopify because you can grow with it from 10 products to 10,000 products. So that's a really good platform to use if you do plan to scale. So that's why the variation pricing there is so substantial. Get a website from $1,500 to over 60,000. When you're looking at WordPress, it's a little bit more technical heavy, but again, you can kind of base level from like 1,500 all the way up to 18,000. And then we'll also go ahead and look at the other two. And Wix and Squarespace are generally kind of within that same realm as well. Shopify is really where we're going to see some pretty substantial numbers for large scale businesses, but these are definitely like average industry pricing. Different businesses are really going to vary based on their style, their design. So if you do decide to work with a professional, make sure you resonate with them as people, make sure you resonate with the designs that they do. And you can always ask people for recommendations as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, guys, cool. We're getting to the end of it. And if you have any questions for us, we really recommend that you reach out, whether you need like a DIY solution. If you're in the middle of building your website and you're like, holy guacamole, I don't know what to do about shipping. I don't know what to do about taxes. You can like book a consultation with us, and we do DIY solutions with people too. So you don't have to do a full website build. If you need a full website build, we can help you with that. General guidance, whatever. We offer free consultations for everybody that we work with. So if you just want to talk to just like get a little bit of advice with like absolutely no pressure, please just shoot us an email. Our whole thing is helping small businesses. We really love to do it. So we'd really be happy to help. Just send us a message, save this information.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next up, which is super exciting, and I hope everyone is going to join us for the next two, and that's when we're really going to get into like technical crunch. So if you want to do your homework and fill out that really great worksheet that we gave all of you, and review this presentation a few times and kind of get a sense of like, you know, what we're kind of talking about here, where you would like your website to go. If you already have one, you know, identify the pitfalls, what's working for you, what's not. And then next up, we are going to dive into what we're calling virtual merchandising, where we're going to focus on how to translate the actual brand energy, your colors, your copywriting, the way your brand generally looks and feels like at a pop-up market into the digital world. Really relying on this blueprint that we've created for functionality to, you know, figure out how to make your digital world, like home, look like yours, essentially. I like to think of it a little bit like an online interior design, if you will. And then we're going to hop into the last workshop of converting your creativity, where we're going to focus on the launch step and how to do it with impact. So we're going to talk about like SEO, analytics, all of the back end stuff on your website, all the things you should be keeping in mind kind of before you hit that launch button. And you know, once you also launch, how to better understand your customer, how to improve your site, you know, knowing that the launch of your site is not like the end, you walk away from it, never look at it again, which generally tends to be the approach to a lot of websites. So I think, you know, you want to have a really good foundation, but then set something up that you actually can go in and use and make changes to improve your business model and just improve your business over time. And in the end, your revenue, you know, because if you're popping up, you want that conversion to be in person and online, you know, why not? So we hope you enjoyed this first session, and we're really excited to work with you all a little bit more, and don't hesitate to reach out like Heather mentioned. And we can, I don't know how long Kara has, but we can definitely take any, you know, we can take any last minute questions.
Yeah, I think if people need to drop off, you're welcome to drop off. If anyone does have those questions or any, you know, personal kind of experience you wanted to share with the group, you're definitely you can put those in the chat, raise your hand, and we could stay a couple minutes if you have time to answer those. Yeah, but yeah,
I do have to catch a ferry. So I will be leaving just Savannah here.
Okay, so just Savannah and I.
Yeah, enjoy Savannah. I'm hitting the mainland. I'll see you guys. Thank you so much.
See you next time, Heather.
Bye,
Yeah,
Heather.
Heather and Savannah said, you can register for the next two sessions if you haven't already on our website. And then I'm also going to be doing on April 23rd a really deep dive into SEO to follow up on this series. So I'm super excited for that. I did that 2 years ago, and I'm really excited to look at what's new and revisit that topic. And also just a little teaser, we're working on a legal workshop series with a local law firm revolving around legal hot topics for small businesses. I'll be releasing that information soon too. So just a little heads up there. Let's see if we have any questions. Oh,
It's awesome. I have a celebration before I sign.
yeah, please share.
I'm invoicing for my first wholesale order tonight.
Woo! That's so exciting.
Very excited.
Congrats.
Great. That's great. And could you share how you got that wholesale order? Was it a personal connection?
Yeah.
Was it online?
It was from a pop-up market in Rhode Island. Actually,
Beautiful.
the artisans market at Lippert Park.
Oh, that's a great one.
Started having a relationship with this family. And then she became a flower farmer, and now she's opening up a brick and mortar store, and she's like, hey, I wanna sell your stuff.
That's
So
amazing.
I love that. Yeah, I love hearing those stories where, you know, you meet someone and then it's months later and then it turns into something. You just never know who you're going to meet. That's why markets are so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Thank you guys very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't think we're getting any questions in, so we'll wrap it up for tonight. And I hope we
Okay.
see everyone on March 26th. And thank you so much, Savannah.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kara, for having me.
Yeah.
Heather.
We'll see everyone soon.
Absolutely. Have a great
Bye.
night.